Hello, everyone. Thank you all so very much for joining us. It's been a minute since we've been here, but my God, we are here and we're talking about Interview with a Vampire. We are specifically talking about the book, the original book that started it all. We enjoyed it. We were just talking in the interlude between the mishap between the webinar and and the live. I hate technology. I really do. But we said that. Well, I know for me, I had this problem all along. I would mix up the movie with the books with the television show. It's all over the place now. And having reread the book, it's like, oh my God, like this is a lot. So you already know us. Let's get straight into it. So, vampire myths. Oh yeah, what are some of the vampire myths that Anne Rice debunked?
Well, specifically in the text or the realm of the text that we read, Interview with the Vampire, Part 1, that vampires aren't a fan of the light. They actually quite love it. As Corey reminded me, the cross is like, okay, look, I was a fan of Christ before this, so it's not that crosses are going to do anything to harm a vampire. Absolutely fake news. One of the other things was the reflection, that they'll basically be invisible if they look in a mirror. So right out front, it's like, okay, all of this is a whole bunch of hogwash, and yeah, a cross isn't going to do anything to me. Neither is garlic. Probably like garlic on my pizza.
Right.
Well, since we're talking about vampire myths, what is it? What's the guy's name? Stoker, Dram Stoker. You know what I'm talking about?
Bram Stoker. Yeah.
Yeah. So in those movies or movie, I don't know what it is because I don't think I've ever watched it. But we basically learned that vampires are solitary creatures. That is not what Anne Rice gave us.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that, Corey?
So I like the way that she her vampire world as it relates to other vampire worlds because they are not solitary creatures. And Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Dracula character really lives in isolation in a castle, right? It's the traditional idea of what you would anticipate a vampire to be, right? But in Rice, they have vibrant lives full of sex and people and emotions, big feelings, right? And so they're not solo. They're not solo. Now, at this point in the book, we haven't really seen much of other communities of vampires, but we do have this small insular community between the two and then three of them later on, but it's still a community, right, in and of itself, and which is completely different than what we've seen in other vampire stories.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, right outside of New Orleans, the Big Easy, baby. Yeah. So, this is the setting for the book. You want to talk about that?
Okay. So, as a Louisiana native, what better place to be than in Louisiana and in New Orleans, or really in the case of the book, a little bit outside of New Orleans, where Point de Lac plantation was, but for all intents and purposes, we're gonna call it New Orleans. Ask anybody from there, you say Metairie is New Orleans, they're gonna tell you no, it's not. East Bank, West Bank, but what have you. So we have this 25-year-old Louis who is just basically kind of caring for his family. They have this plantation, and I don't know how far we want to go if we want to discuss the brother. Up to this point, well, yeah, he has this basically mentally ill brother, and he is hyper religious. And so, kind of early on, when he's telling his story I feel like we need to back up a little bit because he's telling his story to the person who he calls boy. We don't find out the name of the interviewer right out, and of course, if we've seen the movie or have had any exposure to this at all, we know the interviewer is Malloy. But in the beginning, we don't really have any names.
Mhm.
So he starts kind of telling his life story to the interviewer in the beginning. And we find out a little bit about his brother and his bout with mental illness. And so I'm going to pause right there.
So, so when we were reading this, okay, so I recall us having this conversation when we watched the series, right? And in the book, I thought of it again when the way Paul left this mortal coil, so to speak, right? Again, it really led me to believe that Lestat, first of all, Lestat's a bastard. Okay, he is not the French white in part 1 of the story. He is a bastard, right?
He is foul. And a leech.
He's a leech. He wants to play his money, right? And so I got the sense, and I'm curious your thoughts, that what Paul was seeing, because in the books he describes Louis was describing when Paul fell, or it almost seems as if a wind pushed him, right? And I really feel that was Lestat, and they kind of, I was wondering, I didn't remember this, but in the first season of the series, they also kind of sort of alluded to this maybe being the case, but they never explored it. And I see the same theme as come up in part 1 of the book. And so
I thought the same thing when I was going through the book. I'm like, "Ooh, wait a minute," because okay, the slaves or the house servants or whatever were like, "Hey," it was like it was swept like by as if by the wind, and I'm like,
swept as if by the wind. And like the way they described his body move is like he lurched forward, kind of as if he was pushed. Not that he jumped or fell. You know, I mean, she's very descriptive, and she was very descriptive in that piece.
The birds carried him.
Yeah, right. It was the birds, all right.
It was the birds.
Queens was involved.
It was something. And he was hearing voices, and he was hearing whispers, etc. And we see that. Well, I'm gonna stop there, but we see something similar happening a little bit later on when we get to Louis' interaction with someone else. So.
I completely agree. I'm glad you brought that up because I was reading and I was like, hold on, this checks out. This is really, really familiar.
It is.
For Louis, it's like an instance was orchestrated, for you to need Lestat and be, go down this rabbit hole of being just absolutely devastated. So you needed something or someone to latch on to. So.
And there was Lestat, right? The perfect person to latch on to me. Let me be your whatever, right? But it's still different, though. This Louis is so completely different. He's not as morose, really, as we've come to expect Louis. And as he gets to be in the movie adaptation and a little bit later in the books, I think it's a little bit different Louis. Like this Louis is in control of his money. This Louis, he has control of himself, whereas the Louis that we've come to understand does not.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but my question is: do you think that's because we're hearing it from his perspective, like we're hearing his thoughts, right? And do you think that's why?
It could be because in the series, and I know we're probably going to do this a lot. Compare the two. We were kind of on the outside looking in, even though we were kind of hearing versions of the stories, right? But this is written from Louis' perspective as he's telling the story. As he's telling the actual story, they did the same thing, but it's different. It's different. It's almost as if I'm Louis looking at myself and telling it, right? And remembering and etc. And it just feels like Louis is different. It feels like Louis is different.
I agree.
Okay. All right.
I don't dislike Louis. Let me say that.
I don't dislike Louis in this one, like as much as I dislike Louis in our other versions of him.
I was just surprised at I feel like Lestat got less attractive in the book for me because he
Yes,
was a mooch. And I
he was
didn't
a mooch.
appreciate that.
I did not. I did not like it. I didn't like it. I don't recall that when I read this the first time, and maybe my grown eyes are reading, and I've seen too much life and to understand and recognize this. But I don't feel this. I don't feel what I felt watching the
Yeah.
story.
Went a little dry reading this book. Yeah, it's a little disappointing.
I don't know why that just made me laugh. I didn't feel what I felt. I'm just
I didn't
books,
feel
girls,
what
and
I felt.
purrs. Thank you for coming back.
Hey, books, girls, and purrs.
You didn't feel what we felt either, birds, girls, and birds. Right? We not feeling our French wide this time. I don't know. It's something
No.
different.
All right, let's move. All right, so as a result of Paul's death, Louis spirals into an alcoholic stupor from guilt. Is this consistent all the way through? I know the movie has a different spin to it. What are your thoughts about that, Elia?
I don't know if it's my internet going out a bit, but you kind of faded a little bit.
Okay. So let's see. So, where are we? Yeah. So Louis spirals into an alcoholic stupor from guilt. The movie is just a little different. What are your thoughts about the difference between the books, movies, and television show as it relates to that?
So still kind of fading a bit, but I did hear the comment about him going into the alcoholic stupor after Paul's freak accident. Um, I feel like in the movie it was more geared toward the wife and the child versus the book being because of Paul's death, if I'm remembering correctly.
So
Right.
I also kind
Oh,
of think that. Go ahead.
I must seriously be delayed, y'all. So I apologize for that. So Corey, I guess my question to you is: in the movie, Louis was married, had a kid, and in the television show, he was not, and neither was he in the book. And so, why do you think they did that?
I think it kind of. So I think it was a different sort of attachment, but in the stories, for instance, like in the series, I'm gonna think about it through the series because it's been a while since I've seen the original movie. But for the television series, right, we have a very adversarial relationship that Louis has with his family automatically, and they did kind of delve into that a little bit more in the first season prior to everything that happened to Louis. They spent a lot of time in that relationship, as opposed to in the book, we see very little mention of the mother and the sister outside of the casual walks that they would have in night, right? And they kept a little bit of that in the story in the television series, but again, it wasn't that same animosity. It wasn't that same fight with the family in the book as they led us to believe. And I think I don't know why they did that. I'm assuming that they felt like it was a more compelling story to focus more so on the relationship in the book between Louis and Lestat initially in part one, because that was really what the story is about, right? He's telling his story as it relates to the life vampirism. And in the series, we've had all these iterations of the book, the original movie, so they know that we've seen that, we've understood that aspect of Louis, and they want to do something a little bit different, right?
So here's my question. So not my question. Here's my thought. My thought is that you have Brad Pitt, you have Tom Cruise, two A-list actors. We all know that Anne Rice always wanted these two beings, these two vampires, to fall in love.
Mhm.
The movie comes out several years after the book comes out.
Right.
Things have evolved just a little bit, but probably not enough. And so my question is, now you have some space between the movies until the television show actually comes out, and the world, definitely America, is much more accepting of homosexuality. And so do you think now was that space where this homosexual lifestyle could live and breathe?
Yes, I think that's also the reason why. Because I want to say Christopher Rice and some other people that were close to the original book was saying that this has always been inherent. Homosexuality was always inherent in her writings and in her works, and that was the intent of the relationships. The characters themselves were more polyamorous, right? They were with whomever, and which was really kind of ahead of its time in the 70s when the Interview with the Vampire was initially wrote. So at that particular point in time, this is a controversial book that spoke to segments of society already that were kind of on the outskirts, and that's kind of led to its cult following. Right now, it's different. Right, there's still that essence of that part of the book that they can really tell the story, because at the heart of it, there is a little bit of a love story, not in part one in the book, but
No, it's very, very surface. You know, there are some homoerotic undertones.
undertones, and you got that in the
Definitely.
movie too. But it's nothing like what we got in the series. So I think we should recognize that because it is a little bit different. Um, but definitely, as towards the end of the first part, Lestat kind of had, these feelings towards this other little guy that, kind of briefly makes his debut at the end of part one. So I mean, it was there. They just did not like each other. They did not like each other.
That whole Claudia piece, though, is like, okay, you want to raise a child with a grown man? Okay,
Correct. Right.
all right. Okay. So I agree with you. Definitely ahead of its time. But I love what they did with it. I don't want
speaking
to.
of, speaking of Claudia though, so what is your thoughts about Claudia? And she's one of our favorite characters in the series, right? What did you think about Claudia? It's completely different, but yet you still felt a little bit of that bite and that wit in the
I
books.
I think I wanted a little more
Yeah,
Claudia.
yeah.
But honestly, what was delivered in the book, it wasn't bad.
Mm-mm.
Um, you got to see some of the character development of
Right.
Claudia very clearly in the pages. You know, kind of the same thing that checks with the movie as well as the show. Like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm clearly coming from being this little girl to developing into a full out woman and wanting to know my origin. Like, where did I come from? I know I wasn't born a vampire. And
Correct.
so to me, that stayed fairly consistent. Um, I enjoyed reading about Claudia because she was still that little spitfire. So I appreciated that they kept that consistent across the different things like the movie and the show. And so
And it was funny too because in the book she's like 5 or something when she's originally turned. In the movie with was Kirsten Dunst. She was what, 9, 11, 14, 9, 11, 14, something like that, something around in that age range. Um, but what's so different was in part one of the book, you do see the way it was written. It really shows a gradual change in her intellect, but also the character itself. Because there's a part when Louis mentions um, to Lestat, he was referring to something about go and play with dolls or whatever, and Louis was like, "She's not a child anymore," right? And it's like they were both kind of. It took a moment for them to realize that even though, and they knew that as vampires that she aged, her mind aged, even though her body was still young. and even for them, it took them a minute to kind of recognize that. And I just, while reading it, I loved how they kind of transitioned that character in part one for her.
Her body wasn't able to physically, I guess, go through puberty, but her mind
Her
did.
mind went through puberty, baby. She was a whew.
So we're discussing Claudia's character across the different avenues, even how she was made. Um, that kind of threw me from the book to the movie to the show, with Louis feeding on her and then leaving, and Lestat pretty much paying for her at this home of sorts, and then bringing her back after him telling Louis, "Hey, I think I want a child tonight." I'm like, whoa. There was a lot of weird pieces there for me. I was just like, oh, okay, this is kind of a creep show.
It was. And there was some creepiness that I didn't really remember, and I was like, oh.
What are your thoughts, Jermaine? I see those eyes. They're saying so much.
No. It wasn't that. I'm just responding to my computer. No, it was a lot. It was a lot to take in, because I have come to think of the movie, the television show, as almost gospel, and going back to the book, I'm just like, dang, like, even though I remember I read the book like while the season 1 was going on. And so it was like, there's so much that I've forgotten in that short space of time. It's only been 2 years. And so it was like, dang, like, how could I have like missed that? Like, that was crucial. That was I'm not going to say a change, but a distinction, a crucial distinction that I missed.
Another distinction too is the father. I know we didn't really talk about the father yet, and so that opens up a whole other just path of no answers that I don't have yet. You know, like who is the father? You know, what's the story?
We never saw him in the movie. We didn't see him in the show. No. They just like wrote the blind man that was living upstairs completely out.
Like, he went upstairs and never, you know how they used to back in the day, send the character upstairs and never come back down? Well, he never came downstairs. We never saw him for him to go back upstairs. So I just don't. And it was a necessary part of Lestat's character development that I think both kind of missed out on, because it introduces the aspect that Lestat was really, for that particular time period. We always thought, based on the movies and the TV series, that Lestat had money, came from money, or that he was highly educated, right? But this shows that Lestat did not come from means. He did not possess all those attributes that he really showed, and that was really acting out of his own insecurities.
Yes, they took Lestat and made him from Sugar Ditch, Mississippi.
He was trash.
He was trash.
Yeah, he really was. Well, at least from Louis' perspective, right? Because remember, Louis is telling the story. Another thing too, throughout the television show, the movies, Lestat, and even to a certain extent, even in the book itself, Lestat is always telling Louis, rid yourself of your family. And yet Lestat himself has his father living upstairs, right? And wants Louis to kill his father. He's too afraid to kill his father. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're telling me, if I'm Louis, you're telling me to do all these things, but you can't do it yourself. How does that sound?
It's craziness.
He still has that brazen nature.
It's the unmitigated gall at this point for me. The unmitigated gall.
You don't have no money. You on my plantation, being served by my people, and you have the nerve to want to be a piss poor creator at best.
But then gets mad when Louis would ask questions about his creation in other vampires. What I was thinking as I was reading that the whole point of that and all of Lestat's actions were really to maintain control over Louis so that he can continue living in the lifestyle that he thought he should be accustomed to. Right? It was all he was gaslighting him.
Yes.
To a certain extent, like if you read the further, well, what is it, Lestat? The next book, you get a sense as to why Lestat was hiding that information, at least some of the information. So there was a reason behind it. But yes, I still agree that he was gaslighting Louis a great deal, and it was all about control. I do want to move because I'm looking at the time as well. A couple things that stood out for me that I don't really want to talk about: the story of Babette and Louis. The fact that Louis had some type of love for Babette to the point where and Lestat, in his own way, loved Babette's brother. All of that was weird to me, but it was good.
It was so good.
It was good. It was like,
good.
Yeah. It was like this could have been in the show. This could have been in the show.
Been in the show.
Like, okay,
it
anyway.
Really could have been in the show.
Yeah. Also, Louis' original reason to kill or bleed animals was because of his desire to eventually kill humans. He wanted to savor animals before he eventually went on to humans. And I know we've talked about this when we covered the show. I just wanted to hear your thoughts about this.
So I think
am I still lagging?
No, I got you. I think that
I think I am.
I really like this part of the story because it really kind of opens up Louis a little bit for me. Like at first I was irritated with him, the fact that he wasn't gonna drink the blood of humans as a vampire. I'm like, come on, man, you could do a little drink. You don't have to take all of it and kill him. You could do, I was mad. I was irritated. I like this version of Louis better for the simple fact that, and they explained it, Anne Rice explained it in depth, is that he viewed this as he had a reverence for life, right? And every moment, every second, the heartbeat, he tied all of that together to a reverence for life. And he wanted to respect it. And so he didn't want to just treat it just so, like kind of like as a throwaway. He wanted to respect it. Yeah, so cavalier. And so he wanted to respect it. And eventually he does. But I really like how they told the story of the progression of, how he eventually, started drinking blood consistently. And I'm assuming that he eventually continues, or maybe he stops again at some point in the future. But as of right now, he's drinking blood.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, your thoughts?
Drinking babies too, from what he did to poor Claudia. And I want to sit here for just a second. Like, speaking of the weirdness we did earlier, like, I don't know if it's my perverted mind or if it's just in reality, but the way in which he was describing Claudia, it was real sexual to me.
It was. It gave that vibe a little bit, and how he was drinking the blood and how that feeling.
Yes. And which we know vampires, to me, I always get that as just sexual,
it's a heightened sexual thing.
Creatures. But it's like you realize this is a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And so you talking about her like that's your bitch. It was weird. I was like, whoa. And her skin was so sensitive and she smelled so good. It was just like.
And how I wrapped my arms around her and also the kind of stuff. It's the same language that they use at Lestat, that they used when Lestat was the same thing happened with the two boys.
I'm like, dog.
Later on in part 1.
She in a 2T, like, chill out.
The same thing. It was the same descriptive nature of the act of. I didn't care much for that. I did not care. I'm not gonna lie. I did not care much for that.
What in the Pornhub? It was a lot. It was a lot. So I was repulsed.
I did not care much for reading that. I kind of skipped over that a little bit. I was like, this ain't it. I don't like this.
Like, I'm a mandated reporter. I don't think I'm supposed to read this material.
Well, since we're talking about Claudia and Louis, what'd you say? Oh, since we're talking about Claudia and Louis, basically in the book, Louis stopped himself from killing Claudia. He explained he thought he was going to kill himself. He was going to get, caught up in the rapture of the blood.
Of the death. Caught up in the rapture of blood.
Anita Baker is
nothing else can compare.
So anyway, but in the television show and a little bit in the movie, I believe, they both, well, at least the television show explained that a vampire, especially a new vampire, finds it very difficult to stop themselves from sucking blood, right? But Louis was able to do it. What are your thoughts about that?
I think Louis has a little bit more control, or he wants to have a little bit more control, and that's a part of who he is with the whole respect thing. Lestat, he don't give a he don't care. He gonna suck them down to like he's sucking out a straw till ain't nothing but a husk. As long as he don't go down with that last drink, right? There is no respect there, right? There is none. So Louis still had a little bit of that respect.
He gonna do what, Corey?
He gonna suck him down to just a husk, a skin husk. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, this is the right.
Did you say suck him like a straw?
How you gonna do it? He was.
So this was. So this was a throwaway line, but they compared greetings. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go ahead. This was a throwaway line, but basically, the idea of vampire covens it was compared to slavery. Does anyone remember that line at all? It was a throwaway line. It happened really, really quick. What are your thoughts about that? I want to go to Elia because Elia lets Corey go first every time. So I want Elia to opine on this.
Yes.
So Corey, please translate, because for some reason I cannot hear Jermaine without the choppiness unless it's real petty, and that comes in real clear.
Jermaine was asking about the part in part one where they were comparing vampirism to slavery. It was a very brief line, and then they also kind of did it again a little bit later in part later on in part one, where they were kind of talking through slavery itself and how their relationships related to it on the plantation. But what are your thoughts?
You mean Louis, our wonderful victim Louis, feeling as if he was a slave to Lestat, and especially since he kind of piecemealed him with information and kind of weaponized those things. It's like, okay, my dog, like, I hear you, but no, you will not.
But you will not. But they were also kind of inferring that it's like that all the time, because I feel like Lestat was saying as a part of that line that all vampire fledglings are kind of enslaved to their masters, because I think that was Lestat's experience, right? And so he's.
I hear you.
Yeah,
I hear you. I don't.
It's not. I mean, there's nothing comparable to it, but I mean, but still.
But yeah, Louis, poor Louis. That's all I can say. He bless his heart, as they say. But Lestat did some dirty work. He did. He
He did some
absolutely did. So
nasty work, some real nasty work.
I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, it's ballsy, especially since where's your money? I keep going back to that because you have this man, and to use his words, kind of enslaved, but he got him by the balls. But you don't have any money. Your blind daddy is upstairs in my house.
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening to you verbally accost him over and over again. And you love spending money. Like, let's get into how Lestat was hemorrhaging money that wasn't his. He liked nice things, just spend it, spend it, spend it. But I will give it to you guys. I agree with you saying that this Louis is, he has his wits about him, because he would not put Lestat's name on anything. Like, nah. He was still, in essence, in control of that money.
Right.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think Louis in the book was so firm on that as opposed to the television show? We do know that Louis has money in the television show, right? We know that, right? But it is very clear. It is made clear to us in the book that Louis wasn't down for that. He's like, I'll bend over. It's so many ways. I'll bend over, but not when it comes to the money, baby. Well, why is that, Corey?
So, I think it's the story. It's the Lestat that we get in the series compared to this Lestat that we have, right? So we are immediately presented with a Lestat in the book in part 1 that is a user, right? Immediately. A bum. Right? The Lestat in the series, the television series, is not presented that way at all. And Louis is basically, for lack of a better word, he's dickmatized, right? He dickmatized, right? That thing had him every which way.
As opposed to bamboozled.
Hoodwink. Led astray. So I think that is a real difference, right? And let's go back to Babette and that whole situation, because I thought that was such an interesting part of the story that we never even saw or heard people of in the movie or in the series, right? But even more interesting was Lestat basically stalking this boy to keep, like, basically as a kind of stalking Frenier, I think is his name, to the point of where he was going to kill him just out of being malicious, just to be malicious, considering the fact that this boy was the heir to the land, was the male heir in the household, that had a lot weighing on his shoulder. And Lestat, in his infinite greed, was willing to take him away from his family. And Louis, in all his heart, was trying to stop him. I thought that was such a good, it just really colored the way that I see Lestat, right? And so it's probably not going to change until we get to the next book. But right now, I ain't feeling it.
Oh gosh, this really upset me.
Oh, yeah.
I still like Lestat in that he is a great villain.
Yes.
You love to hate him. And so it's just this Lestat, I don't know that I'd give up my human life for this one, because I'm not giving you no money. We're not doing that. Like, I can't get past that part. Like, wait a minute. Y'all gave me broke Lestat in the book? I am so disappointed. Y'all gave me Obamacare Lestat. Y'all gave me food stamp card Lestat.
Louisiana Purchase.
Literally, y'all gave me credit score for 100 Lestat. I can't. It was so disappointing.
And so here's my question.
Well,
this is my question. Go ahead.
No, you go.
I'm done.
So my question is, how do we get in part 1? And this is what I'm curious to see. to the later parts of the story when because the Lestat that we know does sort of kind of emerge from this, because this is just the beginning. The Lestat that we grow to know and love, quote unquote, does seem to come out of this at some point in time. So I'm curious to see where exactly this happens. And through the telling of the story, what happens to where Lestat kind of gets a little bit of his machismo back, right? To the point where in Vampire Lestat, he's a rock star. Because this Lestat right here, I'm not buying no tickets to his show.
This Lestat is not even a coin star.
No. He not even OnlyFans star. So I don't know how. I'm not buying no tickets to his show.
Well, the book came out when in the 60s, right? I believe. Someone correct me if I'm wrong.
75.
And at that particular point, 75. Okay, I stand corrected. So at that particular point in time, the society was a little different. Like he was that was everything that he was doing was like way out there, right? Like we know some people who are bums today, and there were probably bums back then, but we didn't see it in popular society. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Now it's kind of commonplace. It's kind of commonplace.
That's true.
Anyway, those are my thoughts. Anyway. I do want to change the subject just a little bit about the third character, probably the character that is most beloved, but because she died, fans couldn't latch onto her in the same way as they could with Lestat. I want to talk about Claudia. So in this book, in part 1, there were times when Claudia was described as a mute. She would just sit and not say much. And I didn't catch it until this rereading of the book. And so I definitely wanted to hear Elia's thoughts about Claudia being a mute.
Okay, we spoke about Claudia just a little bit earlier, and still kind of getting a delay. But I think what you're saying is you want to hear our thoughts on Claudia in general.
Specifically, how
About her being a mute.
Her being a what?
Mute.
Claudia being a mute? Oh, not as rambunctious as we saw her throughout the show. So I still fell in love with Claudia. I don't know if I'll quite give her mute, but definitely not the same Claudia. It did take her a little bit to kind of come into that spicy character a little bit. Still not the level of what we see from Delaney in the show. Not that, but I still like her because to me, she's still very calculated. Mm-hmm. Very, very calculated. We see her from coming from this little girl to this all-out monster, really. And I love how they kept it consistent with her kind of having her thing with Lestat and the hunt, and Louis kind of being the mom kind of thing. But definitely not the rambunctious character we saw that had a whole lot to say, mostly reading books and doing that sort of thing, but still fell in love with the character.
So I kind of think that the reason why they kind of in the book, the reason why and why there's a little bit of a difference between the book and the series is that Claudia is older in the series when she's turned. So this Claudia is actually a little bit younger. She's 5. So initially, probably the first 5 to 10 years that, or whatever that they had her, she was really kind of confused about the whole situation, because already we know that Lestat wasn't really explaining anything about the life other than them just hunting and eating. That's to anybody. So she was trying to figure it out, and that is one of the reasons why she stayed quiet. But then it's also part of the reason why at some point in time when Louis realized how much she actually hated Lestat because of how much he kept from her about her nature and who they were and etc. Right? She blamed him, right? And I think she was processing, right? She was processing everything that he was saying and everything, and she was really growing into her own to the point where she began to grow up and mature as a vampire as much as an adult would. And so she had questions. Initially, she probably didn't have any questions because she thought as a child, right? But the more she kind of grew in the blood, then she started to really kind of start to put some things together and really be like, wait a minute, something ain't right. You know?
She started as an anomaly when we were introduced to her. So I agree with you. She's just,
Yeah.
she did develop because she was a baby. So that's a great point for her not using as many words. But the fact that she didn't die when he first fed on her, her heart just wouldn't stop beating or, slow
Yeah.
as he was saying. So it's just like this is just a phenomenal character all around. This little girl is an anomaly. So just imagine what she's gonna become as a vampire.
Right.
Is what I'm thinking.
Right.
And so in the book, once Louis tastes the blood of Claudia, he's been introduced to human blood, right? And so he's much more willing to partake in human blood. So he's killing, he's just killing. He's not killing as much as Claudia, not killing as much as Lestat, but he's killing, right? And so
Right.
that is a little different, right? It's not little, it's very different from the television
very
show. And so
different.
I just wanted I wanted your thoughts about that, especially Corey, because you said earlier that your impression of Louis has changed, and I wonder if this was part of it.
Yes. Because kind of initially, I didn't say Louis was weak, but I said initially in the series, one of my issues with Louis was that he was so emotional and that he was portrayed season one, especially, and more so in season two, is highly emotional, volatile, just a lot, right? This is a little bit different. This Louis does not seem to have mental lapses, and we know part of this was because of Marmon's influence, but this Louis does not seem to have lapses in his understanding or is not being persuaded, is not being hoodwinked, not being bamboozled. He is fully control and in his right mind, his faculties, and he understands very well, right? He knows what's going on. He's not being made a fool out of, right? So this Louis, I kind of like, I root for him, right? I really am rooting for this Louis in this story more so than I rooted for the other Louis, right? But more so the book version of Louis as opposed to the series version. I think there was some significant changes in the characters, which is why I can see why some fans of the original book were unhappy with some of the changes in the series. But again, it's an adaptation; it's not a true telling of the story, like a for real one-to-one comparison.
So So one thing that is consistent about the movie, television show, and the book is the fact that Claudia continuously chooses Louis. Um, I mean, there's no surprise there, but based on what we're reading in the book, does it make sense? Obviously, I have to go to Corey first because I think Elia is hearing me a little late.
So yes, I think it does make sense. Although I think it makes sense for Claudia to still choose Louis because again, Louis is still more maternal or matronly in this, even in not being that way, right? He's still that way in the book, right? He takes care of Claudia. He's concerned about Claudia. They both of them talk about how Louis specifically talks about how he wanted a companion, right? Someone that to talk to, and Claudia wanted the same thing. Um, at this point in time, Lestat is not that, right? He's not a companion. He's not that character. He seems to be one track in his being at this point in time, right? So I do think that it is valid, even though Louis is the one who took her life initially.
Other
Oh
than
yeah.
other than the weirdness with Claudia, I find this Louis more palatable. I do.
Mhm.
Um, I don't get as much of the whiny "woe is me" Louis here, although he has experienced some awful things. This Louis is just, I don't know, just more palatable. Now, don't get me wrong, I love watching Louis in the show. Probably, just as much as I like watching Lestat, even though I'll probably never say that again. But you know, Book Louis, I will say, is just more palatable. He is. He is.
And we say that about Lestat now. Now, in a few next, and when we get closer to part 3, get into Vampire Lestat, that'll probably change, right? There's going to be some things. There's going to be some redeeming qualities about Lestat, and he's going to mature as well. So right now, we ain't feeling him, but I think it'll change a little bit. Yeah, baby, the hell yeah, said nope, nope, nope.
So it's been almost 60 years, and Claudia has lived with them, for 60 some odd years. At this point, I think it was 65, but I don't want to be incorrect. But anyway, so she decides that she no longer wants to sleep with Louis. So they decide that they want to give her, or she says she wants her own coffin, and they get her a coffin. And so the scene in the book is very, very similar to what we saw in the television show. But what happens later is not the same. She decides that she does not want to sleep in the coffin. She continues to sleep with Louis. I really want Elia to answer this, but with the lag, I don't know if she can.
So was the question about Claudia's choice of where she sleeps? Again with the weirdness,
Correct.
but I'm gonna leave that alone. Um, I think Claudia just has really good discernment. Like, okay, I can hunt with Lestat. Like, I can kick it with him like he the homie. But I don't trust you not to put a stake in my bag. Now, even though that's one of the vampire myths too, as far as this book is concerned, like, no. I find Louis way more maternal. I should say fraternal, but I know. He's more nurturing. And so I have no desire to lay with Lestat. No. He's great to hunt with, but I don't feel like he's a true protector. And I feel like she gets more of that from Louis.
I agree. That's exactly what I thought. I think there's even a part in the book where they talk about safety, and towards that end, when she had started to plot, she was more concerned and more aware of Lestat and his every movement, and I think that she had already kind of started to really discern that, what, this ain't, they got a lot of things going on, and this, and I need to watch it.
So speaking of, okay, so when they decide, well, I don't know who decided what, even though I just read it yesterday, but basically, it was Louis that decided to make plans to leave Lestat. And when he made those plans, he signed over some of his properties, some of his money, so that Lestat would, feel like he could stay in New Orleans and the two of them could go off. But it was Claudia who decided to kill Lestat. This has been my burning question, and I never had an opportunity to ask this prior to. Why kill Lestat? Why kill? I mean, I know why I would want to kill Lestat, but why would they want to kill us, even though they mention it in the book? But does it make sense to kill Lestat?
I would also want to kill Lestat, because the Lestat that we are currently seeing is really, he's selfish, he's manipulative, he is all those things, and he's not someone that I would want to be tied to for forever, right? Because of because of those things, and he's not forthcoming, and he's not like there's a deception there. There's something there that they're unsure of, and that even at it, if he knew, he's not going to tell them. He's already decided. He said so many times in the book that he wasn't going to in this first part. So, and I think really it's just to get away from him and to see what else is out there. They feel like they're missing something by being with Lestat, and because of Lestat's refusal to tell them history and to tell them what's going on. But on second thought, as a kind of an addendum to that, part of the reason why Lestat isn't staying is because he has history with those other vampires in Europe and the other things, and there is a lot of things that he is protecting them from in a way, but they don't know that yet. But so while yes, I would get why they want to kill him, some things maybe could have been avoided down the line if maybe perhaps some reasoning would have taken place.
Well, Louis feels like he's in
Oh yeah, do you?
Oh, sorry. Louis would want to kill Lestat or be okay with him going because he feels like he's in bondage and not in a good way. So there's that. And I agree with Corey. Lestat is very secretive. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I can't grow or thrive as a vampire. Double entendre. See what I did there? But at any rate, I don't feel like I can thrive with you at all. And so once Claudia feels betrayed, of course, for her, it's up. He got to die. He has to die. I need my lick back. And so that's where she's with the whole situation. But I'm not surprised at all that Louis would be okay with seeing him go. Who wants to be a slave? No one.
Right. And then again ties to what we were saying earlier, how time vampire maker and master to enslave people.
Like, you need me.
I do want to say that. Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say, Elia? Oh, I do want to say that I didn't necessarily remember this from the book, but in rereading it for this, it was so similar to the television show. Like once it was decided what they were going to do, that even though the television show fleshed out all of the details, the grand arches, if you will, in terms of the storyline was very, very similar to the television show. What were your thoughts about that, Elia?
Couldn't hear the question.
I
don't know. I feel like I don't know why.
What do you think about the thought? What are your thoughts about the grand story between the book and the series being similar? Do you think that they were both similar, or even though there were nuances and differences, the way that the story was told was still very similar?
I do. I think the TV show and the movie are just the TV show, or either
all of the above.
I think they did a fairly good job with kind of keeping the essence of it. Of course, there are, like you said, there are parts that are missing, but any change, and I think Jermaine and I have talked about this before, I feel like only added to the overall show. So I feel like the essence was kept. I do, because although, like we talked about, the time that the book was written, of course, there are homoerotic undertones in there. They turned that up to 15 in the book. I mean, I'm sorry, in the TV show, which was totally fine by me. But like we all agree on, it was the timing, right? Mm-hmm. And so I feel like they did a great job. And then I think we mentioned the 2 A-list actors. So no one was trying to homo out in the 90s on the screen like that, being A-list actors. Now, no, who cares? Everybody's kissing the same sex person in the mouth. It's great. We love to see it. So I feel like they did a good job with keeping the overall essence from the book to the movie to the show. Even though I would put
their personal issues aside. Their personal issues aside, Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. If they were to do like another movie, do you think either one of those actors would portray themselves as a gay man?
I would see Brad Pitt doing it before Tom Cruise because there's those allegations with Tom Cruise, and there always have been. And so I think that he would try to insulate himself against stirring up all that.
He would want to lay horizontal with a man that might make him look taller.
Jesus. Jesus.
Lord. But I could see Brad Pitt. I could see Brad Pitt more before I could see Tom Cruise. And with Brad Pitt,
I agree with you, Corey. By the way,
career, at this point in his career, he doesn't have to. Like, why? He's already made a name for himself. If he does it now, he's just doing it because it's a really great role, and he really wants to, he really wants to do that. And then he kind of already did play that part in Alexander the Great. He kind of did have kind of a little bit of a thing, but it was brief. It wasn't real on the nose or anything. So
no, not on the nose at all. Because I was waiting for it. I wanted it.
I did too, because that's the story. That's historical accuracy. But I mean,
correct.
Again, that was early 2000. So, So
I think. Okay. So this is what I think. I think Brad Pitt, even back then, would have been okay with it. I think the machine around him was not okay with it.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I can see that. I just don't think that at the time society just was not ready for it. They weren't ready for it, unfortunately. So.
All right, guys. So unless there's something else that we want to talk about in part one, that brings us to the end of this. Hopefully, when do you? Because it took a minute for us to read part one. When do we want to come back together and do part two?
I want to say as soon as possible.
Because
I need to keep the momentum. If I'm giving too much time, oh Lord, we'll be doing this in December.
Yeah. And this is just the first book. After this is Vampire Lestat. And do we even want to try to read Mayfair Witches?
I ain't doing it. I ain't doing that. But by the way, Mayfair Witches is still in the top 10 in Netflix.
Yeah,
I don't understand these things.
People like it. We're gonna have to cover it again. We can maybe we could do the first 3 episodes, and if we don't like it, we ain't got to cover it.
I'm thinking that they're not going to do what they did to us last time.
I'm really hoping they don't, because if they do, we writing letters. It's terrible.
RMS says no Mayfair Witches.
No Mayfair. Thank you.
That is the most unwitchery witch show I've ever been a part of, that I've ever seen.
The Mayfair was unfair. Oh my goodness!
Considering it was in the same universe and they have the same source material, that this was. I just don't understand it. I don't understand.
Wasn't in the universe. Couldn't have been.
Can somebody explain why? Why? Can somebody explain why Mayfair Witches has better ratings than Interview with a Vampire?
Well, we know the reason why, because Interview is homoerotic, and there's a contingent of people that, regardless of whether or not the story is good or whatever, they are accusing the show of being woke, et cetera, et cetera. And so, unfortunately, they don't know the source material, and they don't know Anne Rice's views on these things. That was what she always intended for those characters, and so they don't know the story of her. So
I need people to get over themselves, because good television is
good television. Whether they white, black, brown, green, purple, yellow, orange, it don't matter. They got 2 dicks, 3 dicks, 1 dick, 2 asses. It don't matter.
Like I'm just appalled at what they delivered, and I could do a whole dissertation on anti-Mayfair witches for what they presented. So, mm-mm.
I think it may have been updated now. I think that that maybe interview may be in there now. I'm not really sure. I'll have to look at it again.
I hope
was in
so
there
because
earlier.
I've gotten more enjoyment out
Oh.
of Charmed, Bewitched, American Horror Story, I Dream of Jeannie shit. Like,
And the
in
new
black and
charm. I like the new charm better than Mayfair Witches, and I didn't like the new charm.
I was okay with the new.
I did. I did not. I did not.
And it seems like in the comments they're agreeing with us that Mayfair Witches was an absolute dumpster fire, and that's me putting it nicely.
It was Lasher was the best part of Mayfair Witches, and Lasher was not a witch.
Armis 2110. So that thought crossed my mind. So Armis says they missed an opportunity with having Louis' brother communicating with Lasher. Is that what really happened?
Was it Lasher that was fucking around with Paul? We ain't got there yet. I'm shooketh. I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna make it all the way to Mayfair Witches to read that and kind of digest all that. But we gonna keep going with Anne's books. We gonna see what happens.
So Elia is saying next week, Corey, what, you down?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. So everyone, you will see us next week. We will cover part 2 of Interview with the Vampire, the book. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share with all your friends. Have a good one. Oh, what you say? Go on with you.
We are shooketh.
Okay. All right.
We are shooketh. We are shooketh. We are shooketh.
I love it.